session.
Second.
Okay. It's been moved to return into general session by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Schilling. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read a summary of the minutes of the June 5th, 2023 meeting of Troy City Council?
Minutes of Council, June 5th, 2023. There was a public hearing on ordinance number 028, 2023. Committee reports. Community and Economic Development Committee recommended legislation be prepared authorizing resolution of necessity regarding the completion of the Oakmont Creek subdivision. Community Partnerships Committee recommended legislation be prepared authorizing the 2023 CHIP partnership agreement between the county and Piqua and Troy. Finance Committee recommended legislation be prepared to approve the expansion project agreement application by Project Next. Committee recommended legislation be prepared authorizing MVCC to act on the city's behalf regarding the natural gas aggregation program. Committee supports proceeding to purchase a demo ambulance, and there was a motion to approve that recommendation. It was passed. Finance Committee also considered establishing an extra fee of $5 a month for a large refuse tote, and the majority recommendation was that the fee not be supported. Law and Ordinance Committee reported regarding a C1 and C2 Trex application of Troy Station LLC, and the recommendation of the committee to approve that Trex was approved. Recreation and Parks Committee reported regarding funding for the Miami Shores Equipment Shed, and the majority recommendation was that the legislation be prepared to approve additional funding. Streets and Sidewalks Committee recommended a professional services agreement with LJB Inc. of Miamisburg to design the South Stanville Road Reconstruction Project Phase 2. Regarding the West Main Street Improvement Project, the committee recommended legislation be prepared for the appropriation of 4 additional properties. Resolution number R33, 2023, approving plan of operation and governance of the MVCC for natural gas aggregation program was given first reading and was adopted. Resolution number R34, 2023, an agreement for the design of the South Stanville Road Reconstruction Project was given first reading and adopted. Resolution number R35, 2023, resolution of necessity related to Oakmont Creek subdivision was given first reading and adopted. Resolution number R36, 2023, enter into the PY 2023 CHIP program partnership agreement was given first reading and adopted. Resolution number R37, 2023, authorizing additional funding for the shed at Miami Shores was given first reading and adopted. Resolution number R38, 2023, accept donation of real property was given first reading. Ordinance number 028, 2023, rezoning on State Route 55 was given public hearing and second reading. Ordinance number 029, 2023, approving expansion project agreement filed by Project Next was given first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 030, 2023, filing of petition for appropriation of certain property associated with West Main Street project, first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 031, 2023, appropriation of certain property associated with West Main Street project, first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 032, 2023, filing of petition for appropriation of certain real property regarding West Main Street project was given first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 033, 2023, filing a petition for appropriation of certain real property regarding West Main Street project was given first reading and adopted. There was a presentation regarding the Community Rights to Work program by Beth Taylor. Following various comments, council adjourned at 8:48 p.m.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. How does council wish to dispose of the minutes?
Move to adopt.
Second.
It has been moved to approve the minutes by Mr. Schilling, seconded by Mrs. Snee. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Moving to committee reports, we have a number of reports this evening. We'll begin with the first two reports, and the Community and Economic Development Committee, and Mr. Schilling.
Thank you so much. Okay, on June 12th, this committee met to consider an extension of the 90-day to 180-day moratorium be established on permits for new self-storage facilities. This would provide staff with time to complete the recommendation process for appropriate land use regulations. It is a recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared extending the moratorium on permits for new applications for self-storage facilities by an additional 90 days to permit staff time to evaluate and recommend appropriate land use regulations. So that there is no lapse in the moratorium, this committee supports emergency legislation. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll get it all done. Respectfully submitted by Mr. Pierce and Mrs. Snee and myself, Jeff Schilling, as chair.
Thank you, Mr. Schilling. Are there any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, please continue.
Okay, thank you. This committee met again on June 12th to review the recommendation of the Troy Planning Commission that 58.093 acres of the Isern-Hugel annexation with an address of 3054 West State Route 55 be rezoned from the county zoning of A2 General Agriculture to the city zoning of R5 Single Family Residence District. At the June 5th public meeting or hearing and at the committee meeting, concerns were stated by neighboring property owners which are discussed in the detailed report. It is a recommendation of this committee that council not support the R5 Single Family Residence District requested by the property owner applicant. Committee recommends that ordinance number 028-2023 be amended to rezone the parcel of 58.093 acres from county zoning of A2 General Agriculture to the city zoning of AR Agricultural Residential zoning, and a motion to amend the ordinance will be made at the June 10th, June 19th council meeting. It is further noted that the committee would prefer that this parcel be developed as a planned development residential property. Okay, and again, this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Snee, and myself, Jeff Schilling, as chair.
Thank you, Mr. Schilling. Any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, moving to the Finance Committee and Mr. Siebert.
Thank you, Mr. President. This committee met June 12th to again discuss establishing a fee of $5 per month in addition to the current refuse recycling fee of $17.50 per month per residence for those residents that receive a 96-gallon refuse tote. The committee previously met on this subject on May 30th and did not support such fee. Additional information has been reviewed by the committee. That additional information can be found in the detailed report, which states, since then, staff provided additional information that 507 larger-sized totes were being used, and if the fee is approved, those residents that have the larger tote will be contacted to be advised of the additional fee and given an opportunity to ask to have the 96-gallon tote replaced with a standard 65-gallon tote. The new fee would not be fully implemented until October. With those changes, there's a majority recommendation now that the committee that the legislation be prepared amending section 919.11 of the city's ordinances to establish a fee of $5 per month, full or partial month, in addition to the monthly fee established for refuse collection and recycling, for which a resident receives a 96-gallon refuse tote. While Chairman Siebert, myself, was not at the meeting, he advised that he does support this recommendation, and that's respectfully submitted Mr. Phillips, Mr. Rozelle, and myself as chairman, and I would like to thank staff for sort of cooperating and massaging that process to make it applicable to at least this committee.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Siebert. Are there any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, move to the Streets and Sidewalks Committee with two reports from Mr. Phillips.
This committee met June 12th regarding bidding phase 15 of the sidewalk improvement program to replace raised, cracked, or otherwise dangerous sidewalks. And it is the recommendation of the committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the 2023 sidewalk repair Program Phase 15 at a cost not to exceed $310,000. And this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Snee, and myself as chair.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Are there any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, please continue.
We also met on June 12 to consider recommending legislation related to the appropriation of the final property order for the city to proceed with the West Main Street Improvement Project Phase 2. Discussions are ongoing and agreement may be reached prior to legislation being enacted. However, the city must be in a position to file the easement paperwork with the Ohio Department of Transportation to meet the project timeline of right-of-way acquisition and certification for the project to be bid in the fall of 2023, and funding provided to assist with the project cost. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the Director of Law and the Director of Public Service and Safety to file the necessary paperwork for the appropriation of the parcel identified in the detailed report. This committee supports emergency legislation so that the appropriation process can commence immediately to meet the timeline to receive funding. And again, this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Snee, and myself as chair.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, we have 2 oral reports this evening. We'll begin with the first one on the Personnel Committee and Mr. Pierce.
Mayor Oda has requested council concurrence of 5 appointments and 1 new appointment to the City Beautification Committee. I move that council concurs with the reappointments of Barbara Reddick, Barry Van Kirk, Phyllis Dawkins, Mary Davis, and Peggy Wolk, and the appointment of Lisa Brecker to the City Beautification Committee, all for terms commencing July 1st, 2023 and running through June 30th, 2025.
Second.
There's been a motion made for the appointments to the City Beautification Committee by Mr. Pierce, seconded by Mr. Twist. Any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee? Yes. Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall? Yes. Motion is approved.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. We'll move on to our final oral report of the evening. It is a liquor permit notice from the Law and Ordinance Committee. Mrs. Snee.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Ohio Division of Liquor Control has transmitted the notice of the application for a new D3 liquor permit application for Megumi Hibachi LLC at 12 South Dorset Road. A D3 permit is spirituous liquor for on-premises consumption only until 1 a.m. According to the Ohio Division of Liquor Permit website, there are a permit quota of 14 D3 permits, 11 issued, 3 are available, and there are 3 applications on file. The Police Department has not recommended an objection or hearing request be filed, and this has been announced.
Thank you, Mrs. Snee. We'll move on to citizen comments for items on the agenda. We have 2 resolutions and 5 ordinances for deliberation. If you wish to address council on any of those items, you're welcome to come to the podium, give your name and address. You have 2 minutes to address council, and Mr. Kerber will be our timekeeper this evening.
Ben Sutherly, Troy Historic Preservation Alliance, 110.5 West Main Street, Troy. THPA is willing to cover $53,280 in costs for permanent repairs to the 112 to 118 building's parapet by McMiller Masonry if the city accepts the donation of the building and would agree not to pursue demolition for at least 2 years. The THPA board authorized this step this past Wednesday, as we would like to be part of a collaborative solution that will bring this building back into active reuse in the community. If you're concerned about costs, I think your structural engineer's report should put your mind at ease. If you're concerned about public safety, Scott McMiller told me he can be out there at 3 o'clock in the morning to repair the parapet the day after we receive authorization. We are aware of developments in recent days involving Miami County and have seen zero evidence that the building's condition has changed in recent weeks. On the contrary, a brand new report commissioned by the City of Troy shows the building is structurally sound and quite repairable. We are deeply concerned, however, that Miami County and the City of Troy do not seem to be on the same page in taking enforcement action against this property owner, relying on different structural engineers that come to very different conclusions about the building's condition. It's worth noting the county's latest adjudication order last month deemed this building a serious hazard, and it was based only on the on-site assessment of one structural engineer, and that structural engineer was hired by Mr. Kimmel. The timing of the county's complaint on Friday also is very questionable, coming just before tonight's city council meeting. We hope it was not intended to influence your vote. We hope that it will not influence your vote. We believe this building, with its rich 180-year history and significant streetscape, can again be a contributing part of our beautiful and historic downtown. We hope the city of Troy will collaborate with others in the community in making it so, and ask that you accept both the donation of the building and our offer.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address council on the items on the agenda?
Good evening, Council. Kirk Ritter, DDC Management, LLC. We are the applicant for the rezoning of West State Route 55 from county zoning to R5. Just want to thank you again for giving us the opportunity to come before you and speak. I know we met last week, or we attended the Economic Development and Finance Committee and heard a lot of good thoughts, opinions on the project, and while we understand the concerns regarding drainage and the road improvements, our preference is still to zone the property to R5. That's just our preference. We have done a PD development, plan unit development, however you want to call it, in different municipalities before, so we do have experience with that. But we always do try to do a conventional-based zoning if we can, so that was why we went with the R5. We're still very excited about the project and want to move forward with it, but we just want to reiterate that, of course, our preference would be R5, and that we think that we can work in the preliminary plan stage process after the rezoning to address those concerns. So we just wanted to come before you and just share that with you, and if there's any additional questions that you might have for us, I'm here to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address council for items on the agenda? Can you give your name and address? You have 2 minutes.
Kelly Snyder, 935 Atlantic Street. I just would like a clarification on the building property being possibly donated to the city. So if the city accepts that property, any cost involved then falls on the city, whether even if you demolish it or if you remediate it, the city takes on all that expense, correct?
Mr. Titterington, Mr. Kerber, would you like to address that question?
Under the proposal that came forward, that is a correct statement.
Okay, thank you.
There you go. Thank you, Mr. Kerber. Anyone else wish to address council for the items on the agenda?
My name is Sarah Camphy. I'm at 1100 Winchester Drive, which was actually incorrect in the last agenda. It was 1100, not 100. I just want to say, I know I've been very vocal about the property, the Eisner-Hugel property, and I just want to say that I really appreciate the consideration that the council has taken into the comments that myself and my neighbors have put into this. I've spoken with many after I attended the last meeting for the Planning and Economic Committee last week, and we see it to be a big value to not only us, but also the city to have a plan be able to be reviewed by the city prior to allowing the developer to just go forward with everything. I understand that the developer says that they will work with the city, but I think in the case of the gas station that was put in across from Clopay with no input from the city, that very thing could potentially happen again, and so I just wanted to say I appreciate the consideration for asking for a plan development. Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve Hendrickson at 975 Dickerson. I'm worried about the tavern building, just like everybody else, maybe for different reasons, though. Beware of Greeks bearing gifts. This is a very old building. There's conflicting engineering reports, and I don't know which one's right. As an outsider, I have no idea whether either of them know what they're talking about or not. Maybe you need to hire 4 more engineering companies and you can get a total of 6 conflicting ideas. But a building this old can wind up to be a black hole for money, and it's going to be city money, and it's going to be a ton of it. If anybody thinks you're going to get by just fixing some bricks and so on, by the time you're done, there's so many people involved. The county's involved. I don't know if the judge is still involved, but this thing's going to go on for a while. And in the meantime, you're going to wind up, everybody's going to want to start to fix it now, of course, and money's just going to keep going and going and going, and who knows what's going to happen depending on which engineer's report is correct. But anyway, before you get into this thing, you ought to have some idea how much money you're going to wind up spending on this thing. And it's not going to be just some little amount. And don't think you're going to go to the Easter Bunny, the state, or somebody else and say, oh, we're going to get some other kind of ARPA money or whatever. That money is ours too, oh, by the way. So anyway, I just want to caution you, and I want everybody to be cautious about what this thing's going to be. We're going to be, I don't want to be here another 2 years and several $100,000 plus still not knowing what the heck's going on. So that's my only point. Just be careful. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Have any questions?
Good evening. My name is Christy Schell. I live at 1205 Hillcrest Drive in Troy. I'm the former and still board member of TCW, and we did submit a letter of intent to support whatever wisdom you all decide to have this evening about the building, but to be a partner in that if the building does move forward, and to participate however we kind of come to an agreement to work on. So I did kind of want to let you know, obviously there's many contingencies, but we skeletonly have the finances lined up for a certain level of completion, and so we think that we would get the building in a situation after the support of the city to get us to a place where we would all be very happy and moving forward, similar to the CAS building. But I just wanted to let you know that we are open and available for that partnership as our board has agreed. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address council? Seeing none, move into resolutions. We'll ask Mrs. Knight to read the first resolution of the evening, Resolution R38, 2023.
Resolution number R38, 2023. Resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to accept the donation of real property and to enter into a settlement agreement with 116 West Main LLC and Randy Kimmel and declaring an emergency. This is the second reading.
I'd like to move that we postpone this indefinitely, please.
Motion's been made to postpone indefinitely. Motion dies for lack of a second. This will be laid over for a third reading. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next resolution of the evening, Resolution R39, 2023.
Resolution number R39, 2023. Resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for Phase 15 of the sidewalk repair program, cost not to exceed $310,000. This is the first reading.
Move for suspension.
Second.
It has been moved to suspend the three reading rule by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Twist. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whitten?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
The three reading rule has been suspended. It has been moved to adopt the resolution by Mr. Twist, seconded by Mr. Siebert. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whitten?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. And we'll move on to ordinances. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the ordinance O-28, 2023?
Ordinance number O-28, 2023, an ordinance changing the zoning of 58.093 acres of in-lot 11550, parcel number D08-107388, in the city of Troy, Ohio, from the Miami County zoning of A2 General Agriculture to the city zoning of R5 Single Family Residence District. This has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission. This is the third reading.
I'd like to make a motion to amend that ordinance to, from the R5 to the city agricultural residential zoning.
Second.
There's a motion, there's a second. Are there any comments or questions? Mr. Schilling?
Yes, I'd like to make a couple of comments on this as chairman of the committee. We had a couple opportunities for our residents and the city to comment on this, and again, we want to make sure that we try to address some of their concerns, starting with safety. In other words, that, we have talked about widening and straightening Nashville Road. We would like to see curbs and in lieu of sidewalks, recreational trails be added along both the front on State Route 55 and also on Nashville Road. Again, this is part of our Complete Streets program. That Complete Street program essentially funnels most of the non-vehicular traffic on State Route 55 as a conveyance into the downtown of Troy. And again, this is we need to start doing this to get the system set up and moving. I think the city would probably be willing to pay the difference between standard sidewalks and the recreational trail. Based on the Troy Master Plan, we need easements on the south side of the lot or this parcel of land, so that again, according to our master plan, Swales Road can be extended. And again, so we need some consideration on that. We have talked about a planned development. This has worked very, very well with most of the newer subdivisions that have come into the city of Troy. And from our side of the equation, this, we've worked well with developers in this area, and I think it would be a good way to proceed on that. And of course, the other part of it, in the planning, we want to make sure that the drainage is correct and retention ponds and other whatever we need to build as far as, additional, we talked about oversizing some of the plumbing in this division and whatever, so I know, the city is more than willing to work with the developer on that. And of course, we also like to see, I know the developers talk about having an HOA, and again, the HOA has, in my own subdivision, works very, very well as a way that the residents have a representation about what goes on in their neighborhood. And, again, so I think that those are some ideas. I know there's some concern about the lot size. I live on the west end of town, and we have everything from apartment complexes. In my neighborhood, we have apartment complexes, we have small houses, we have condominiums, we have mid-sized houses, and we have houses that have lots up to 3/4 of an acre. So it's a very mixed development. It works very, very well, and I think, most city planners like to see a mix of development in their subdivisions and in the residential areas. And so again, I think we can lot size is, I know is very important to the developer. I think we can look at that very strongly and see how we can be of some aid there. But anyway, these are some of the things that the committee considered, and this is one of the reasoning that we're asking to, for the time being, go to the agricultural residential zoning, so that we can have some more discussions on some of these items before we proceed to approve any type of a zoning change, a permanent zoning change for this particular lot.
Mr. President? I just want to clarify that the amendment that Mr. Phillips made, that the issue that we are voting on is changing the county zoning to the city zoning of agricultural residential, and nothing to do with the plan for this property, simply changing the zoning to city zoning.
Well, the only vote right now is to amend the ordinance.
Amend the motion, right.
Right, and I wanted to give some of the reasonings why we're doing this.
And my only concern as finance chairman with one of your things, is you sort of said, I think the city would be committed to pay for rat trails.
In my opinion, I think they'd be something they'd want to consider.
Well, consider might be true, and I'm not saying yea or nay, but it sounded more like that was something that you were pledging the city to do, and I don't know.
I don't have the power to do that.
That's right. So that's the only issue I had with those statements.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Titterington.
I heard a lot of suggestions, but I also heard the word "we," and I don't remember that these specific items, such as a rec trail, we may have mentioned a little bit about it, but we didn't really get into specifics. And a lot of the other lists that you came up with, I don't recall us talking about Monday night. Who is the "we" that you're referencing?
In my experience in business, there's no I, it's always we. So as far as what I look at is that as the city, as a council, as we look at this, these are some of the items I believe that are very important. I think we discussed this in committee, and I think that was perhaps some of the reasons that the committee voted the way they did. And again, we're not allowed to discuss how we vote because of sunshine laws. But I'm making a reach here to think that maybe that is why we voted the way we did. And so, but these are again items for discussion. I think that in my own mind, I would like to see some of these things put into the plan before we consider the final decision on the zoning. Okay, that's it. I mean, I'm giving you my opinion. Like I say, again, I think these things are very important. I think it answers a lot of the questions that the residents had. And again, we're here for the residents of the city of Troy. We're not here to, I encourage development. I mean, we're talking, this is a multi-million-dollar project. You look at the, 3 houses per acre times 58 acres times $300,000. You do the math. It's a big project, and we want to get it right, and we want to make sure that our residents have a say in it and that we listen to them. And so that's what we're doing tonight, because actually, the city government is here to serve the people of Troy.
Mr. President, I just want...
Before Mrs. Snee says anything, anybody else have any comments they want to make? Mrs. Snee.
I just want to clarify, as a member of the committee, we did discuss some of the reasons for proposing to change the city zoning, but we did that with the understanding that any plan from a developer would come back through the process that involves the Planning Commission and back to the City Council. For myself, there were no discussions of what that plan development might exactly look like. We were strictly talking about the zoning and the reasons we might consider a different zoning classification than the one that was proposed.
Any other comments or questions? The motion has been laid upon the table by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mrs. Snee, to amend the ordinance from the R5 zoning request to A2 general agriculture. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Just It's agricultural residential, not general.
It's listed as general agriculture on the agenda.
But we're amending it, for Mr. Phillips, and I seconded his amendment.
Oh,
It's
okay, so that's
currently
the county A2, okay, I apologize. So yes, it is the AR, agriculture residential
Yes,
district,
sir.
I apologize. Mrs. Knight, please call it.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Seaver?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whitten?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
The motion is approved.
The motion is approved, and under Rule 21 of Rules of Procedure of Council, this will be laid over till the next meeting, in which it will be held as a third reading on the ordinance. Well, I believe it says in the rules it would still be considered a third reading.
Well, it's considered as the third reading.
It is considered as the third reading, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Now that we're all completely confused, Mrs. Knight, will you please read ordinance 034, 2023?
Ordinance number 034, 2023. An ordinance authorizing the filing of a petition for appropriation of certain real property and declaring an emergency. This is for the West Main Street project, and this is the property of McDonald's. First reading.
Move for suspension.
Second.
It has been moved to suspend the three reading rule on the ordinance by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mrs. Snead. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Seaver?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whitten?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second. The three reading rule has been suspended. It has been moved to adopt the ordinance by Mr. Twist, seconded by Mr. Whitten. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Seaver?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whitten?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next ordinance of the evening, ordinance 035, 2023?
Ordinance number 035, 2023. Ordinance imposing moratorium for a period of 90 days on the acceptance of new applications and the granting of permits for new self-storage facilities within the city of Troy, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. This is the first reading, and this moratorium would attach to when the current moratorium expires.
Move to suspend.
Second.
It has been moved to suspend the three reading rule by Mr. Whitten, seconded by Mr. Twist. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Seaver?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whitten?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes. Move to adopt.
Second. The three reading rule has been suspended. It has been moved to adopt the ordinance by Mr. Twist, seconded by Mr. Whitten. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whitten?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Seaver?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next ordinance of the evening, ordinance 036, 2023?
Ordinance number 036, 2023, an ordinance amending section 919.11 of the codified ordinances of the city of Troy, Ohio regarding solid waste services. This establishes an additional monthly charge of $5 related to residents that receive the 96-gallon refuse tote. First reading.
Move to suspend.
Second.
It has been moved to suspend the three reading rule by Mr. Seaver, seconded by Mr. Twist. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Whitten?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Abstain.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Seaver?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Three reading rule has been suspended. It's been moved to adopt the ordinance by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Twist. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Abstain.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whitten?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, will you please read the last ordinance of the evening, ordinance O-37, 2023?
Ordinance number O-37, 2023. An ordinance changing the zoning of parcel numbers D-08-105875 and D-08-251110 in the city of Troy, Ohio, from M2 Light Industrial District to B2 General Business District. These lots are located at 1511 and 1551 South Market Street near Waco. This has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission. Be a public hearing at the next meeting.
Does council want to act on the ordinance?
Public hearing.
Public hearing.
Public hearing, Jen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I saw that. Public hearing. We'll have a public hearing on this at our next meeting, which stands as the first reading. We now move on to communications and announcements. Mrs. Knight, do we have any?
No, sir.
All right. Moving on to comments as officials. Mayor Odom.
I have nothing this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. Director of Public Service and Safety, Mr. Timmington.
Well, even though we do have a meeting before the next holiday, we are closed on July 4th, which is the day following that. That is a Tuesday. Offices are closed, but the refuse and recycling will be on schedule. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Timmington. Director of Law, Mr. Kerber.
I have no comments this evening, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Kerber. Do any council members have any comments this evening? Mr. Pierce.
I want to thank Mr. Sievert over here for his work on the Juneteenth celebration down at the park and the march. It was a very good event. Saw the mayor there as well, too. So, thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Any other comments from council?
Okay. No, go ahead.
No, you, seriously.
No, I was, and as many of you know, my father was a firefighter for 28 years. He passed away last Monday. In his honor, our family has established a memorial contribution scholarship through the Troy Foundation for apprentice firefighters. And he loved the city. He worked here until his shoulder prohibited him from working here. And he was very involved in the community in a number of different things. So, not trying to shout out my own dad, but it's a good event and a good scholarship. So, anyways, he'll be missed.
Thank you, Mr. Sievert. Our deepest condolences to you and the family. Mr. Whitten.
I know work is still ongoing, but I heard from two residents of the first ward about the Critter Ditch and the improvements they thought they noticed after the heavy rains that had taken place last week. So, good news coming from there.
Thank you, Mr. Whitten. Any others have any comments? It's now time, any staff members have any comments this evening? Seeing none, it's now time for audience comments. If you wish to address council on any topic, this is your opportunity to do so. Please come to the podium, give your name and address, and take as much time as you wish to consume. Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Our next meeting will be Monday, July 3rd, 7 p.m. here in council chambers. Thanks for attending, everybody.